Welcome to the Scottish Watches podcast. This episode is all about Geneva Watch Days, a place we visited, some people we saw, some watches we tried on. We're going to take this chronologically as we had the meeting, so we're not going to talk about the biggest heavy hitters, the biggest releases right at the beginning of the show. We're going to take you on the journey, the way we paved it, the way we followed that path and trajectory. That'll probably make more sense to us. Might not make sense for you, but it makes for a good story. Amida were the first place to check out, the first appointment of the first day of the show. And they were going to be doing something to us that we didn't expect. Yeah, they showed us the new range of watches. We'd seen them before. They are the casquette style watches that you've seen maybe from the likes of Gerard Perregaux. They reintroduced one a couple of years ago. Also, MB&F are known to use this kind of driver style watch where they use a prism system to reflect numerals to your eyeballs that were originally reversed on the top. This time around, instead of covering up those reverse dials on the top, they've got a targa roof, like a Porsche, I suppose. You can look through there, you can see what's happening underneath, and you can obviously tell the time through the front. As well as showing us the new release of the watch, the previous iterations, the gold-coloured ones, they took us on a bit of a whirlwind experience.
They then made us sign a kind of weird NDA. It wasn't really very official. Lots of things like the US government been talked about in there. More about that later, I have to say. But then they said, here is a kind of badge. You need to go up to a specific room in the Beau Rivage Hotel. You must knock 4 times and then they will let you in and they'll show you something. So of course we thought, sounds good. Off we went. Bang, 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 bang. Door opened. We were rather tersely told to come in, empty our pockets of electronic devices on a table. It was a Spartan room. In fact, the hotel is undergoing a bit of a renovation, so it was one of the rooms that's been completely ripped out. Wires on the wall, no wallpaper, not exactly high luxury. We were then ushered into a dark room with some spotlights. Felt like a bit like an interrogation cell, and we were then shown a very cool piece that unfortunately we're not allowed to talk about. Technically, I don't think their NDA is up to very much legally, but we're going to honour everything that they asked us to not talk about. But yes, needless to say, something very cool is coming down the line, Ricky.
It is, and what Dave explained, it actually did a good job for once, and he's feeling under the weather, I'm feeling under the weather, but yeah, we're given this pass, we were told to go to a room on a different floor, we got there, the door opened, there were parts of the ceiling missing, the walls were missing, it looked like an interrogation room from maybe some, I don't know, thriller from the 70s, maybe like Gene Hackman in The Conversation, a James Bond thing, the old Mission Impossible TV show. That's what it reminded me of. And we sat down, there was this light blaring in our face, it was an interrogation, a briefcase was pulled out, click, click, open, folio came out, top secret, lots of cool stuff. Vintage typewriter on one side, vintage reel-to-reel tape recorder. They set the scene very well. And that started us off on the trajectory of the show. We really appreciated people putting in a little bit of time and effort. Probably didn't cost them a lot of money. Probably cost them a lot of time rehearsing what they did, but we appreciated it and it was fantastic. From there, we moved on to a brand that Neil Duckworth has been talking about quite a lot, and it was our first experience of really seeing them in their own across in Geneva. And the gentleman behind the brand, you said, watch out for this guy, he's well known. I had no clue who he was, sitting there chatting away about this, that and the other, and then Dave's like, he's the head honcho.
It was the main man, the CEO of Favre that was talking to us. In fact, he is very well known because he was previously the CEO of Ulysse Nardin back in the day when they were doing all things new to do with silicon. But yes, we've been advised to go by Neil Duckworth because he's going to be looking after this brand for the United Kingdom. And he, of course, is someone who is very well known to establish brands in the United Kingdom, having done a bit of a job with Tag, then Tag Heuer latterly, in the UK before moving on to do his own brand and his own things. But yes, got to see some really cool things. We also had the designer join us who talked us through some of our ideas about why she'd done certain things, really taking a lot of cues from the historical catalogue of the brand. Definitely within the kind of dive watch, tool watch sector more than anything else. I really quite like these, to be honest, and they are not ridiculous price points. The nice thing about this year's show was there was everything from €500 through to millions of euros on display and show. Initially, when the show first started, it was definitely more towards the upper end of the echelon price-wise, but there's definitely been a development to show everything and anything from lots of brands. So that was Favre Leuba. Definitely check out the show notes because there's pictures galore in there, as long as that is, of course, Miziel can get through all of the photos that we took. There is a copious amount of them.
But before Dave rushes away, the brand was great. The watches were even better. The dials were fantastic. We got to try these watches on. A couple of weeks back, we talked about a purple edition that was based on a green edition that was released earlier in the year. And the price point, that is what we need to talk about. Dave mentioned it quite rightly. There was this almost bathtub curve of you had the really inexpensive stuff. Next brand we talk about, super inexpensive, which was really catching fire. Lots of premium price point products. There we go. It's a good illustration, considering I'm unwell. At the maybe $1,000 to $3,000 category. Then there was a gap, and then it went up to the 50, 100, $500 category. So it was great catching up with those guys. Maybe we'll drag them on the show in future. Next up, Dave, we went somewhere where it was bargains galore.
It was, well, it's a brand called Dennison, not Dennison, as in an area of Glasgow. So drop the T and you've got the brand. This is a brand that's definitely been doing the rounds. A few famous people have been seen wearing these on their wrists, and I believe not being placed by the brand either. They also had the coolest tote bag given out over the whole event, which was a very well made, very bright green tote bag. But back to the brand, they're doing watches in the €500 to €800 category that look considerably more expensive, I'll go with, than they actually are. And they were releasing a couple of new models that were, we'll call them dual time, because it's effectively, it had two different watches in the same casing, which kind of does lean back into very much a 1970s aesthetic. These things are quartz, but that should not put you off. They are very slim, very nice to wear, and with some punchy bright colours, kind of like an avant-garde modern take on something old. I, to be honest, really like these. Toby is the guy from the UK. It's a UK brand, another one of the many UK brands that are up and coming and have been over the years. But yes, Ricky, I think maybe someone that's kind of permanently attached to you was quite taken by these.
Yep, this is the wife's new favourite brand of brands because she loves Spinnaker. Can't say enough good things about them. I'm actually involved Spinnaker a little bit in the process of getting there because she got some SpongeBob accoutrements. You'll see it in the show notes, you'll see it in the YouTube video, it's fine. But this brand, they're doing, I don't know, it's insane value. Quartz is not a bad word. It kind of goes up and down, it ebbs and flows a little bit in the watch industry, we've noticed that. But as of late, nobody really minds. I mean, you take the second hand off a watch, and it could be quartz, it could be automatic. These are inexpensive, we're talking $700 there or thereabouts. Amazing stone dials, different colours, different hues, different mixes. Fantastic proposition for this price point. And if you just were to take away that little logo, you could be looking at a vintage Piaget. There was a lot of inspiration from the 70s. There was some stuff in there that reminded me of maybe Corum from back in the day. Fantastic brand. Recently, we talked about their limited edition that they did in collaboration with Time and Tide. We didn't get to see that one in real life, but we got to see all these other ones. And then we moved on to an absolutely brand new brand.
Well, definitely moving up in terms of price point here. This is a brand called Stollenwurm.
Yes, Stollenwurm. I thought that's what Dave does when he puts his hand down my pants when I'm sleeping.
Well, it is a worm, I'll leave it with that. But yes, anyway, what we have there is a brand that's based around the Stollenwurm. And the Stollenwurm is a fictional kind of snake come dragon come beast that lives in caves. And, well, they said they're not quite sure whether it's an attacky type beast or a friendly type beast. But anyway, looks like it might have my face off me if I was to square up to it. But outside of that, they've got quite an unusual aesthetic to them, based around the whole concept of tarot cards. But we're talking premium materials, we're talking métier d'art skills, everything from wire work through to kind of grand fou enameling, through to kind of lots of different high-end artisanal skills. Cases, well, they had precious metals. They also had tantalum, one of the more difficult materials certainly to be working with in watch cases. And I think it was an interesting tack he took, which was, well, remember we've got the pound stores or the pound or the dollar stores, I think he actually said, in the United States. Well, we are the $100,000 watch brand. All the watches are $100,000. So definitely at a very different end of the price spectrum to where we had just been. I think your wife was also rather taken by this aesthetic. That is definitely up her street.
When we were listening to Gentleman at the head of the brand, this was his passion project. He'd done well in life, he'd done well in business. He was talking about building a car brand, and we're talking extreme luxury sports performance. And he said, you know, watches, love them, wanted to do something. And it's when you see the glint in the eye of somebody who has got the means to take something forward. Lots of people have ideas. We speak to new brands all the time. Some make it, some don't, because they run out of finance, they run out of funding, they don't quite get it over the mark there. These guys are going to get it across the line because behind the scenes, they have got the means to do so. So it was really cool. And the honesty as well, the honesty was fantastic. He was saying, as Dave mentioned, you know, these are going to cost 100k plus. But then he let us in a little secret. Because he is launching this, he's doing them at almost cost. So you're getting something that's maybe worth double that, triple that, whatever it would be on the open market. The bracelet is what caught my attention. The finishing on the actual bracelet itself was astounding. Tarot, maybe not my exact wheelhouse, leave that to the wife, but the watch, the way it was displayed, the actual whole layout of the room, it was done extremely well considering this was the first time they'd really shown these off, and we were there day one having a look at them. So show notes will be your friend. We're going to chat to him behind the scenes and see if he's going to let us in a little bit further to delve deeper into what it's like to come up with some ideas and to be able to take that to market, because that was very interesting.
Indeed it was. And then back down to a much more reasonable price point, we went to see Depancel. They are the sister brand to Amida, who we saw on the first day. They are, of course, are revising what they do, very much racing-inspired watches, very different to what Amida are doing. They are mainly in the 2,500 to 4,000 category. These guys are operating in the kind of sub 1,000 into the sub 2,000 price point, and they've got a few new models out at lower price points. It's a brand we always make an effort to go and check out and see what they're doing. Again, if you're after something that's a wee bit different to, say, things like your Seiko 5s, this very much could be the brand for you.
You walk in a car dealership, doesn't matter who it is, it could be Maserati, it could be Porsche, and you see those inexpensive couple of $100 motor racing inspired watches. They're junk. They generally are shit. Whereas these guys produce stuff that is of a higher quality at a lower price point. So across the range, again, we said at the beginning, there was everything from a couple $100 to, well, millions of bucks, because we went to Jacob & Co as well. So good to see the guys at Depancel doing incredible stuff at a good price point. And slightly over to the side was another brand that we always try and pop in to have a look at, and that is Louis Erard. They had a couple of crazy boffins, that's what I'm going to call them there, to tell us how they created intricate dials using gold wire.
Yes, indeed. So Louis Erard are a brand that kind of operate, I would say, in the entry-level luxury price category. But what they are extremely good at is bringing techniques that you would normally only find in much, much more premium, much more expensive watches into the price point in the few £1,000s or euros or Swiss francs. And they've got a new watch out here that's using a technique that uses gold wires to build up a kind of intricate pattern or design on the dials. Now, this was something that initially maybe we thought this is a old school traditional way of doing things in watches, but no, what it actually turns out is a company that are using older machinery from the electronics industry, typically used to do the wiring circuits on circuit boards, where you've got little pieces of wire between two contact points that are soldered or welded in place, and they're using these machines in order to design and build very intricate patterns on dials. Now, they have, and they mentioned that they've done this for a few brands. In fact, they were quite open about it. One of the brands in that point in case was Hermes, where they had done some very, very intricate dials for them. But they also pointed out that the dials they made for them were more expensive than the complete watch from Louis Erard. So you're getting something that's normally only seen in much more premium pieces at great price points from them. They have used it looks like an intricate design, but obviously it was lots of straight lines, which they did mention means that it's a bit simpler to make and a bit more price conscious. But frankly, I think it looked absolutely stunning. And as a new price point for this type of dial, it was definitely a bit of a breaker.
This year was about being honest and transparent, and the brands did not hide when somebody was there as a guest about them talking about things they'd done for other competitors. That was nice to see. And yeah, the Hermes thing they showed us, it was like, reminded me of my grand's house back in the olden ages of the 80s, where there was a black velvet background of a canvas, and you'd have gold and different coloured metallic strips and wires making up an image. It was like that with a horse, obviously, because it's Hermes. And what they'd done with this one, the way the dial looked, was it was just a filament. It was almost like zooming into a filament with a microscope and seeing those little wires that when the light hit it from a certain way, it was completely black and transparent. When the light hit it from another way, it caught the light. It reflected it back and you saw the image. It was almost three-dimensional and holographic. And as Dave mentioned, it's a technique they use to actually apply the little gold contact legs between the pins in a CPU and the actual die in the middle. So you've ever seen a zoom in of a CPU, a microprocessor, and you see those little gold wires? This is how they did it. It's cool to think that is now vintage enough that people are using it in watchmaking terms and recycling old machinery that would have gone to the dump. That is pretty incredible. And the next thing that was incredible was a new brand.
A brand called Akor. One that had really not been up on our radar at all. But this is an all-new brand, and they have a model called Le Temps de Équilibre, which means in English, time and balance. Now, Initially, when I saw it, I was like, it looks expensive, but might not be expensive, but also could be expensive. Turned out it was kind of a little bit of both. So you've got a watch coming in, 39mm by 11mm. It was available in stainless steel, right through to things like 4N and 5N gold. But you had this really cool multi-layered dial where the hour and minute hands were semi-hidden. Really, there was a circular section in the middle of the dial that was slightly raised that covered the majority of the hour and minute hands, with only just the ends of those hands sticking out from behind this disc, and you had a central seconds hand on top of the disc as well. Price point wise, it was running from around 28,000 Swiss francs through to 77,000 Swiss francs, because some of them were precious metal with all sorts of diamond accoutrements on them as well. They also were asking us what we genuinely thought of them, what maybe things could be changed on it. I think personally it was certainly something a little bit different in this significantly premium price point to maybe what's been done by other people in there. Quite nice. I could certainly, though, take account of what they were doing. It had a very nice in-house caliber in there as well, with a hand-winding function, and nice to see someone entering that mid-premium tier of pricing. Most of the stuff we saw was either very much entry-level or ultra-premium. This was one of the few brands that were new operating in this mid-premium price point.
Good looking watches, reminiscent of various things. We mentioned Hermes earlier, perhaps some of the Pateks, the way that the centre was almost hidden where the hands would be, and then they protruded slightly just underneath a middle disc, showing what's your friend. Good to see people asking the media, it could be us, it could be influencers, it could be people actually know what they're talking about, what they thought of the watches that were on display. And the only thing that we kind of agreed on was the logo could have been slightly smaller. And there was other brands that changed their logo this year as well, not Bremont, they did that a while back. Next place to go was to catch up with folks from Awake, because they have been non-stop. They've just been releasing great watch after great watch for the past year since we first met them at Geneva Watch Days in 2024. They weren't in Borrovage, they weren't in any of the hotels, because all the hotels were under renovation. They looked like they were bricked up. There were cranes sitting over the top of them. And when we first turned up, we thought this is going to be a bit of a mess. And it wasn't. It was really good. This was probably the best Geneva Watch Days we've ever been to. Certainly my favourite. And catching up with the folk from Awake, talking about the releases with the dial artists, with various other players. It was cool just to see what they've got coming down the line, as well as the stuff they've already got out just now.
Yep, always good to catch up with both Lillian and Thibault from Awake. Those guys doing some really cool stuff with these kind of Somai dials, a nice kind of, I guess it's a system that's definitely handmade, not been seen in watches before. I believe it's a craftsman in Vietnam that does the dials, a little bit different from something like Grand Fou, but coming in at very attainable price points, typically in the €2,000 to €3,000 price point, depending on what your tax is in your local market. Always great to catch up with them.
Well, before Dave races away to tell you what was happening after that, there were a lot of funny, cool things that happened this year, and I think it's lost in translation. We were chatting to some brands and they were saying, oh, we've got this cool watch coming out, it's a limited edition piece, it's a collaboration with a motorcycle racist. We thought, that's interesting. Okay, is it a white dial? And then there were other people talking about this, that and the other. Somebody said, oh, this watch, it's for both male and female, it's bisexual. So, yeah, it was good to have that lost in translation thing. Where did we go next and what happened?
We had to get to Breitling, who had, prior to the show, made us sign a significant amount of, really reasonably official NDAs. But we got there and it was in a performance area. And Georges Kern came onto the stage to announce an all-new...
Okay, I'm laughing because something happened behind the scenes that Dave doesn't want me to talk about. So we'll just leave that as such, won't we, Dave? Yes, we will, Dave. Cool. So we left the Breitling area that we're not allowed to talk about quite just now. And we went across back to the main thoroughfare down at Borrovage and one of the hotels that's beside it where other players were showcasing this, that and the other. We met up with Crayon and they were the most uninterested people in the world. They did not want to see us. It looked like they didn't want to see anybody to show off what they had. We were sitting down. They moved us to a different table. Then somebody else went, here, and just basically dropped a whole load of watches, as in two of them on a table. And I said, okay, is there any new ones? Oh, you want to see the new one? They brought the new one over. What's different? Well, not much. And I thought, okay then. Then we went to see Konstantin Chaikin, and we thought, well, last year, Thin King, amazing, breakfast with him, showed off this, that and the other. Great team, he was in high spirits. This time around, he was disinterested. Pretty much didn't say a single thing to us. Neither did his colleague who was sitting next to us. No presentation, no explanation, nothing at all. Halfway through, Konstantin stood up, off, came back, sat down. Don't know what went on.
Indeed, although they did have all the watches that they wanted to show out, we had to kind of interpret them ourselves. So I've no idea how well everyone else was treated towards the end of the show. But anyway, that evening, we then headed off to an event with Maurice Laqua.
We did. It was touch and go. But thankfully, the event was literally 100 yards, 100 metres, 100 whatever you want to call them, from our hotel. And it was peeing down with rain. But we rushed across. We went inside. We were still drenched. But inside this place, I think it's called Curiosity in the heart of Geneva. It had so much cool stuff. It was like, what would you call that place? The gadget store, I suppose, or Mankind here in the UK, where you would usually find trinkets, maybe $10 to $100 for this, that and the other. Well, the price point was slightly exaggerated for the stuff they had on show, but it was fantastic walking around. But the whole point of being there was the new Maurice Laqua range, which unfortunately seemed to be slightly sullied and dulled down because of everything that was around about it.
Yes, they had the watches kind of presented in and amongst all of the other normal things that would be for display and or sale within that shop. Of course, they had lots of the existing range out there, things we've seen before, which we do like. We know that Ricky likes an Icon. But amongst that, there were a couple of the newer pieces, for example, the ceramics that they have recently released. We also got to drink some gin with gold in it, which ended up with Gavin having very golden lips. We may or may not also had too much to drink and had done the whole sketch out of Austin Powers about loving gold, much to the chagrin of the individual who was serving us the drinks. But anyway, that was an excellent event, got to see the things, and we got to catch up with Monica from the UK company that distribute the watches through the UK market.
She kind of tells it like it is, like her honesty and the way she deals with things. Yeah, good catching up with her, like that. And we'd obviously been across to the Mad Gallery to check out the latest creation from MB&F. We had a meeting with them, but we wanted to go and have a look. We saw the new Mad One release with an artist that I cannot remember nor pronounce because you know what my memory is like. We got to see cool watches. The wife got to take some cool pictures, pop them on her Instagram. And that was pretty much day one. Day two started off. We went round the corner from our hotel. Everything is so compact. We're going to do a bit of a shout out for the show here. If you're coming across next year, then it is amazing. You want to do so. You want to get yourself a hotel in the heart. It's not going to cost you too much money. The transportation doesn't really exist because you can walk between everything that is happening between the different boutiques, the theatres, the areas, the actual pavilion itself, and the glass box where they do all the new product launches. Everything is self-contained. And as long as it isn't peeing down with rain, which it was this time, you're going to be fine. Literally a street away from our hotel, past where we had the Maurice Laqua party, is where Gerald Charles have got their new atelier and boutique. It's upstairs, up I think on the 6th floor, where Antiquorum is down on the ground floor, obviously the auction house, and we went up there to check out what they've been up to since Watches and Wonders.
Indeed, and just before we got on with that, the artist name you were looking for is Yinka Elori, who is a Nigerian-British artist who has done many things in the UK market that if you live in our country, that being the United Kingdom, you will have seen them. The Marks and Spencer's crazy coloured bag for your food shopping, or some North Face jackets, and amongst many other things. But he has definitely got a flair for using the brighter colour palettes, almost like if you imagine if you smashed one of those lava lamps all over a wall. That's kind of the vibe that they were going with the decorations. But yes, we did go and visit MB&F later, so more about that later in the show. As Ricky mentioned, Gerald Charles, their new boutique. It's also their boutique and their workshop where they're actually building all the watches. We got to look at lots of their new releases and a couple of things we'd seen at Watches and Wonders. Our favourite, of course, being the tennis ball watch that both myself and Ricky were rather taken by back at Watches and Wonders. They also showed us more of their 25th anniversary pieces, the bejewelled ones with, I can't remember what stones they were, but there was a green one, a red one and a blue one that had a kind of precious metal inset. Well, there's not really a bezel in these watches, but around the edging of the case.
We paid them a second visit, but we'll explain about that further down the show, maybe in the second show. And next place was on the way back. We popped in to see the folks at TAG. Lauren is our conduit here in the UK for information, and she knows everything about TAG. She knows everything about quite a lot of the different brands, and she also deals with the Watches and Wonders information when we travel back and forward to PAL Expo every year. TAG had a couple of things to show off. Nothing crazy because they keep their big stuff for the big launch of Watches and Wonders early in the year, but they actually put some effort in. Some of the other brands, not so much this year. Tag definitely did. They had a cool moon phase in a trio of different colours and arrangements and metalwork, and then they had a couple of carbon numbers.
They had both a Monaco, the square watch, in a chronograph version, and they had a Carrera. I think the Carrera may have been a Tourbillon as well. They were, re-announcing their carbon hairspring, something they've been working on for around 7 years and have talked about before, but there's now 2 different models of watch in full carbon that are going to feature this carbon hairspring. They had the scientific boffin from the laboratories there as well, with quite a lot of the machinery and technology that's used to produce these carbon hairsprings, and he was very open to a Q&A with us about the where, why, what's and when of what is going on with this carbon hairspring. Quite interesting. Nice to see, of course, Tag, a brand that's maybe unfairly been, that's the watches you buy when you don't know what you're doing, but they definitely do know what they're doing when it comes to technology, and they were showing it off to full effect at the show. So always great to catch up with what they're doing. Nice to see them just focusing on a small number of models so that you don't get lost in their vast range of watches, and we got to actually nail down to the nitty-gritty of what they were wanting to talk about.
The black carbon number that Dave was talking about, the chronograph, it reminded me of what used to be the most inexpensive Swiss tourbillon that you could buy. And we're talking back 2017, around about then, and it was a nanograph. They had one of them that was black. It had Porsche acidic green coloration to it, and absolutely loved it. And then obviously Dave's work came along, Raj, and kicked ass. So we don't talk about that so much any longer because they took up the mantle, and they're mostly doing things at really inexpensive price points. But anyway, this isn't an Raj episode. We're going to talk more about Tag and everybody else. It was good getting a bit of time, as you say, with somebody that knows what they're doing behind the scenes. I wish more brands would bring with them. Like last year, Corum had their designer guy, and the year before, we didn't actually catch up with them this year because I think there's some changes afoot. But when there's somebody that knows and can answer the questions that aren't just top level, it does help. It helps us explain things a little bit further. And maybe as you're listening or you're watching the video and you're wanting a little bit more information, it helps you too. But next, we went along to a boutique because a couple of nights before, just before the show started, we were invited for a ragtime event. And that was a collaboration event at night time with Theo, who was organising Micro Milspec, Ferland Mar, and a couple other people. Black Badger was along, obviously James Thompson. We had a good old knees up there. Lots of alcohol drunk the night before the show was to start. Bad idea. But we went to their boutique, which is also their atelier, met the people behind the scenes, had a look at their watches, and again, we're talking $300 and up.
Indeed, so this was the second longest point to get to their boutique, which was over the bridge and up the other side of Geneva, but well worth that little walk it was. Luckily, it didn't rain this time. So we got to see their boutique, which is kind of a mix between a showroom, their offices for administration, and also a little bit of watchmaking going on there as well. And we got to see everything they were up to, their full range of offerings. Yes, Ferland Mar offering exceptionally strong value, both in the quartz area, which they were very keen to point out that they will be continuing, but also moving into their more premium mechanical pieces. In fact, they also had a perpetual calendar they were showing us, which is, of course, at a more significantly high price point than their quartz offering, but definitely maintaining the same aesthetic and feel.
Next, we went to a brand that I'm going to leave for Dave to pronounce because he's good at the word thing. And they were showing off a new movement technology or a new part of a movement. It was the winding mechanism, and we've seen many things in the past. We've seen everything from Seiko's magic finger, I think they call it, right the way through to all these different intricate systems where there was even a watch we got to have a look at that had 2 winding masses, 2 micro rotors working against each other at different sides of the case. But this time around, what they were trying to do was to extract as much energy from the movement of the wrist as possible and divert that using clutches and gears into the barrel. So Dave, you're the boffin here. Explain how it works.
So yes, the brand is Renault Tixier, and they are a brand really designed around a combination of high engineering, so proper mechanical engineering, and also high artisanal skills. So lots of finishing and lots of kind of métier d'art skills going on as well. But really what they wanted to talk to us about was a new micro rotor caliber that they've developed, and not just a micro rotor, but using an all new micro rotor winding system. Now, what they were effectively demonstrating, and it's going to be difficult to put this into words, but essentially the way they described it was similar to what you would get with a KER system or a regenerative energy system. So when the micro rotor spins, now because it's quite small, it's difficult to maintain a high amount of spin on that. It's also winding up another spring so that when it stops, this spring is released, which carries on the momentum of another weight, which helps to put more energy back into the watch system. Certainly looked quite complicated in terms of construction and manufacture, albeit the principle itself is reasonably straightforward. It looks to be a way of gaining more energy back into the movement of the watch with a micro rotor system. Of course, micro rotors historically being not the most efficient of calibers out there, albeit many of the more modern versions are significantly more, efficient and capable than they were in the past. But this is another way to do it. They were also very open about the fact that if any other brands out there might wish to license the technology to put into their own watches, they were very open to this as well. So yes, doing some quite nice things. Very low volume watch manufacturer, but also quite a significant engineering background to these guys as well.
And we don't have time to do a wrist check, but the watch I am wearing actually has a little baby micro rotor in the back there. So if you want to know what we're talking about and the fact that these things are tiny, and to actually wind a watch up, you have to be vigorous with your hand movements. And both me and Dave are experts at being vigorous with our hand movements.
Yes, we are indeed. So Gerald Genta, we went to visit them, part of the LVMH group, who we also visited their manufacture during last year's Geneva Watch Days. But they were at the show again, along with their, partner brand, that being Daniel Roth. They had a couple of new releases, something rather fetching in orange, I have to say, that being their, now I can't actually remember the model. Can you remember what it's called? The one with the spiky bits, Ricky?
The Orange Conquer. That's what we're going to call it. Very spiky, very cool. And it wasn't the new one because it'd been out for a few months, I believe. But they had iterations, they had changes from the prototypes that we'd seen a year ago, and they've been doing great. These designs are very unique. The crystal is probably my favourite part of the whole design, apart from the spiky bits. And it feels very smooth to the touch because it's faceted, but it's faceted on the inside. So no matter where you are and the light is hitting it from anywhere in the room or from a window, it just creates this, kaleidoscope effect on the dial itself. Really cool. Had to pry it from my wife's grubby little hands because that one was going to be leaving and she was going to be doing the 100-yard sprint away from the security guys.
Yes, indeed. I think she really seriously considered that, but luckily she, thought better of that valour.
You can take the woman out of Eastern Europe, but you can't take Eastern Europe out of the woman.
Yes, I think that's probably accurate. I'm glad she's not beside you just now, or else you would be, a dead Ricky. Well, they also showed us a new Daniel Roth piece as well. Very, very classy. In fact, Niran was with us at that event, and he was rather taken by that watch. I think he may be trying to consider how to pay for that without his wife, who was also there, finding out that he's actually done so.
Yeah, next place we went to was to see the folks at Alpine and Frederic Constant. Bit strange all round. A brand that we like, both of these brands. We like Citizen Group, we like Le Jour Perret, Arnold & Son, etc, etc. The person that deals with stuff here in the UK, our conduit, is Daniel. He is phenomenal. Great, responsive, sends us all the information. But the lady that was doing the presentation just ignores us for 5-6 months at a time when we send emails and then gets back to us February after we email back in September. But anyway, putting that to the side, the next crazy thing wasn't the watches that we got to see. It was the fact that they asked us to sign an NDA to see the information of the watches that they were about to show us, but there were some problems with this NDA.
Just a few, as in I think they may or may not have used Google to find a generic NDA, but maybe didn't read it through and change the things that they needed to change. So apparently we were signing away at our lives that we will not disclose information of the US government and their agencies,
But which year should we not disclose this, Dave?
Well, yes, actually also the starting date of the NDA on page 1 was dated 2019. We were also told it was in perpetuity, but then also it ran out 90 days after the start, which was 90 days after the start of the NDA in 2019.
Very strange. I'd like to go back to the pre-COVID times. That was good, but yeah, very, very strange. The watches, there was a couple of dial colour changes and stuff. We didn't really pay attention. After the NDA fiasco, we weren't really that bothered. But what it did tell us was that most other journalists and people don't read what they sign, because this was day 2, near the end of it. They must have had 100 prior appointments with all the different people at the different times, because they had lots of different staff and lots of different NDAs to get signed. We were the first people to actually have a look at it. Yeah, Scottish people, being super careful where we sign in the dotted line.
Absolutely. We then headed off to one of our favourite brands, that being Moser, to see what they've been up to. And they've been up to fairly much. We saw some of the watches they'd released but hadn't actually had our hands on yet, that being the chronograph and the digital watch that was all for the Alpine sponsorship of Formula 1. I was actually, to be honest, most interested in seeing the digital piece, which it turns out is not actually even a watch because you can't set the time on the device itself. It has to be done via the app. But based around the aesthetic and case of the Streamliner, it's a super cool bit of kit, albeit very difficult to get. There's a few hoops you need to jump through. You need to either buy it with the chronograph, which of course makes it a £80,000 accessory, or you have to purchase one of the previous Alpine Team Edition watches, which gives you the right to buy this watch at 4,500 Swiss francs. They also released a couple of models based around the Wandering Hours concept, using some technology from the sister brand, that being Hotellons, integrated into a Moser. These, in my opinion, in the grey, looked absolutely excellent. Really liked what was going on there. I know a few folk have said, it's a bit difficult to tell the time. Well, it's a Wandering Hours, and it's not necessarily meant to be the easiest to tell the time on. It's more a piece of wrist-mounted art.
And I think, trying to remember, what was explained was the differences between this and prior iterations within the family was this one would quickly change over instead of rotating slowly between the different hours as the time was moving forward. Cool looking watches. I really did like the digital one. I loved the juxtaposition of this crazy little OLED display on a Streamliner with a normal looking watch part above it. And to see one of the big brands delving into a digital display on something, obviously it's Moser. They've done the Nature Watch, they've done the Swiss Icons, they've done the Cheese Watch, they've done so many crazy things, but they've actually been quite subdued the last couple of years, almost as if they'd grown up. Well, this year they proved that they hadn't grown up, and when we were sitting there getting the presentation, there was this whirring noise in the background, and we're looking around going, what the fuck is going on? Because they'd wall clocks where the hands were showing the time, but the dial behind the hands were spinning away like hell, so you just doing what Moser does normally. From there, we went to see a brand that I cannot pronounce. It looked like Leroy, as in Leroy Jenkins, but no, it's not pronounced that way at all, Dave. How do you pronounce it? Because you're the man who knows how to say things.
I believe it's Leuba is how it's described, but it's not Leroy Jenkins, as you said. And Stephen Lee, who does represent a few different brands, he's added this to his portfolio for the United Kingdom and was keen for us to have a good look at it.
Very cool watches, very cool movements, lots of things that you wouldn't really expect. It's part of the larger Perlay Festina group, and we've obviously been chatting to those guys for a number of years. We had the guy from Perlay who we saw next, Hugo. He is the CEO. He was on our show last year, and this year he had some cool stuff to talk about. We'll get to in a second, but yeah, this is high-end stuff without the high-end cost. I believe there was a minute repeater. There were all kinds of complications there. So you're looking at inexpensive right the way through to crazy and everything in between. But it's a brand that you're probably going to hear a lot more about, as you've heard in the past from the likes of Moritz Grotzmann and people like that, and Chapek. This is one to keep an eye on over the coming months and years. Next up, Perlay with the Cleopatra and the Josephine.
Two watches that we have indeed talked about in a show not that long ago. Check out the back catalogue to hear all about that. These are the watches that are using their patented dual rotor system, having an automatic winding rotor on the back, kind of where you would expect it, and also one on the front above the dial. These watches, they have emboldened and enhanced them with many precious stones as well. Definitely in the female palette, or the more traditional female palette of watches, but also something that has to be seen to be believed. The beauty in what they've done here is truly inspiring. Lots of other cool new things going on with that brand. Perlay, they've obviously done that, well, the rotor, or the kind of turbine watch, which has got the rotor that's completely full. It's not an operating rotor in that model, but it's on top of the dial, and it's kind of difficult to read the time or the date on it until the rotor is spinning like a fidget spinner.
A brand I like because they do things that catch the eye. A little bit like the Mad one where the rotor on the top spins and grabs your attention. Perlay have been doing this for a while and they iterate, but they haven't run out of steam. A little bit like Studio Underdog. It's the same concept, it's just done differently each time, each iteration, and they come back time and time again with something new. The Cleopatra and the Josephine, we talked about it recently because they stood out, they look great in the photos. I had my fingers crossed when we got to see them in real life that they would stand up, and they did. They were gleaming, and it was a terrible room with terrible light that we were in, and even so, we got to see the best of them. And speaking to Hugo, he is brilliant, he's such a character, and that's what you need at the head of these watch brands. From there, we went to see Oris. We've not really talked about Oris for a while, but we thought we would catch up, see what was going on there. New guy that met us, he's only been there a couple of years, but he was able to go way back into the past through the back catalogue to mention different releases, different collaborations. And this time around, there were a few things on the table, including a new Bamford release.
Absolutely. So Bamford has expanded the portfolio of brands that he's done collaborations with. In this case, he's working with the Altimeter model. This is a model that's been in the range for quite a while, comes in both a metre and a feet, or a metric and an imperial version. In the case of the Bamford, it will only be the imperial version, and Bamford's done what he does best, which is chucking colour at things, and he's done it in a really cool, tasteful way, where you've got bright yellows, bright oranges, bright reds, bright greens on this model, which is normally a little bit more reserved, but it is a fully functioning altimeter. In fact, we got a bit of a tale about how someone had tested it by using it in the elevator of a tall building to see how high up the elevator actually went. Yeah, I think this is a great looking watch. It's a fairly chunky model, comes on a strap with a very funky little deployant clasp on it that's really mimicking the seatbelt you would find as you get on a plane to go on your holidays or maybe a business trip. I personally think this is one of the best Bamford releases that I've seen in quite a while in terms of the collab watch he's done. Ricky, I think you quite liked it as well, although your good lady, she was more taken by something green and a bit frog-like.
We can't see past a Bamford collab, and I got an email today about something that isn't a watch, but it is time related from Bamford, and that's, I think, probably all I can say. I don't know if there's an embargo and I don't want him coming after me. But yeah, it was cool to see that. It was nice to speak to the guys at Oris because they've not been the most communicative in the past. We'll leave it there. Next up, we went across to see the folks at Speak Marine. This is a brand that we've not talked about much on the show. We were going to be talking about them in the past, and then they kind of disappeared off the radar. They were there in a booth, in a room, and they gave us a bit of a potted history on the brand, where it came from, who it's named after, who was involved, who has left now, but what they're continuing to do.
Yes, indeed, we got to see this brand, which is a brand that was sold a few years ago from the original owner, and the brand is now being run by an all-new company with a lady CEO, which is still something slightly unusual in the watch industry. She was at the show. We didn't get to talk to her. Unfortunately, she was tied up with someone else, but we got a great introduction to a few of the products in there. Definitely leaning towards the slimmer, more dress, elegant end of the watch design market, but really cool. I like these. They've got some different things going on, and this is the first time that we've probably actually sat down and had a good solid look at the range of watches in there. Check out the show notes for pictures of some of the cooler introductions that they brought out at this event.
Next up, we went to the top floor of Beau Rivage, where all the penthouses, the big suites are, and we met up with the folks from Artisans of Du Jane. We've heard about them, we've talked about them, we've seen the watches, we've been mesmerised and blown away. And the actual guy at the helm, the man who's in charge, who founded the company or founded this collection of artisans, he came in and he sat down with us. And the whole meeting just evaporated in front of us. It was like listening to one of the world's greatest storytellers telling you a David and Goliath tale in watchmaking circles that had our heads spinning. It was incredible. I don't want to spoil it. We listened for nearly an hour, then we had to go and he had to go and do the next thing, but we're going to drag him onto the show and he's going to tell you how he went up against the biggest in the world and won. And that's all we're going to say on that front. Next up, we went to a party.
Great time. Lots of drinks, lots of fun, lots of interesting people there from both the media and also from many of their suppliers and other people within the industry. But eventually towards the end, I think around about 9:30, Edward began to get a bit hungry and decided that we should all go for some food, and we headed off for some Thai, which in my opinion was excellent. Don't know if it's Ricky's most favourite thing food-wise, but he found plenty of chicken to eat, so he was a happy little man. And we get introduced to some interesting videos that Ricky can describe, because I don't want to get cancelled.
Before we get to the part that Dave read out, it was my notes. It was we actually met up with loads of cool people at the party, including the man who is Second. I was wearing a couple of cool watches. I was wearing my Spinnaker SpongeBob that looks a little bit like a Chaikin, but better and cheaper. And I was also wearing the Snake edition of the Christopher Ward 12. And I didn't know that Second was going to be at this party, but he was there. And I said, listen, I know you're busy and I know everybody wants to speak to you, but can I just grab a couple of minutes and you can explain the concept and the realisation of where this idea came to be? Because I'm a kid of the 90s and the 2000s. Snake on your mobile phone on the Nokia range, it's where I was at. It's where I got into all this kind of cool techie stuff. Where did the ideas come from? So he sat down and I thought this is going to be a 10-minute chat. We were there for well over an hour, maybe an hour and a half, talking about all kinds of stuff. I'd love to have him on the podcast, but he just doesn't want to do it. He feels comfortable creating things. He doesn't want to be the centre of attention. And if I'd hit record on my phone, we would have had one of the best podcasts in the world. So we're going to keep chipping away at him year after year, see if we can drag him onto the show. But it was just, if you ever get the opportunity to meet him, to talk to him about anything at all to do with watchmaking or art or anything at all, it is fantastic to do so. And as Dave mentioned, Ed got a little bit hangry towards the end of the night, looked around and went, I could be doing with some food. So we went to a local Thai place, we sat down, we ate. There was lots of meat, so I was fine, Dave, don't worry about me. And I'd said to him, listen, I've recently got married. What is the key to a good, healthy relationship, wedding, marriage, continue on into the future? And he looked around and he said, I've got a video. He pulls his phone out, goes to YouTube, pulls up a couple of comedians from America, and there is a skit they're doing where they meet, the two husbands meet, their wives are doing something, and they're saying, yeah, I said to her. So yeah, links will be in the show notes for all that cool stuff. But that was kind of the end of the first couple of days, and that's the end of this episode, I believe, Dave.
Yes, indeed, that is the end of day 1, day 2, part 1 of this 2-part little narrative all about Geneva Watch Days 2025.
So you'll want to go through the back catalogue if you can't wait for the next edition to pop out. Gav has been a busy boy. We've been busy boys. We've been coughing and spluttering through this episode. You will not hear it. You'll not see it because it's all on the cutting room floor. But yeah, our back catalogue if you want to see what we've been up to, the things we've talked about prior to the show, and then tune in a mere couple of days for the next episode where we continue our exploration of Geneva Watch Days. All the brands, all the watches, all the cool things that happened and the not so cool things that happened. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you again in a couple of days.